Welcome. Thank you for joining Google and our third Thinking with Leaders event series with a focus today on leadership and resiliency. My name is Diana Britt. I'm based here in Singapore and lead our retail industry solutions team, as industry is a big bet here at Google Cloud. Please let us know that you're here. Fill out the form in the event description below or by scanning the QR code right at the top hand corner, which you will see. And we also encourage you to join us in the social conversation. So hashtag Thinking with Leaders. To join the conversation, we welcome your posts and any questions that you might have for us. Again, that's hashtag Thinking with Leaders. So what is Thinking with Leaders? It's a live event and a platform that we've really created as an industry, kind of for industry leaders to get together and kind of discuss their diversity of experiences, culture, leadership, and career progression. And throughout the series, we're here. We want to be supportive. We want to be elevating you and celebrate all of you in technology, and of course, bring a little humor with that as well in today's series. So thank you for joining us in the community. So again, the discussion is going to be focused around resilient leadership and how kind of these leaders have navigated kind of the complexity during this world pandemic that we're facing today. After the discussion, so we'll ensure we go 45 minutes or so. We'll make sure we've got 15 minutes at the end for Q&A to take any of your live questions. So with that, we've got three fantastic panelists today. So we have Aireen Omar, who is the president of AirAsia Digital. Thank you, Aireen. We've got Ruma Balasubramanian, who is our managing director for Google Cloud Southeast Asia. And we've got Nguyen, our CEO of Pretzel Lab. So thank you to the three of you for joining us today. Just a little bit about Aireen, just some snippets. She went to the London School of Economics and Political Science, graduated from there, and then she went on to do her master's at NYU. Since 2006, she's been a key leader at AirAsia and has various roles. So she was in corporate finance, treasury, fuel procurement, investor relations. And so I think one of the beauties that Aireen's had is really helping this organization grow tremendously and really taking it to what AirAsia is today, which is one of the fastest growing and the most well-known and highly acclaimed airlines in the industry. So thank you, Aireen. Ruma and I have just been working together. It's been a joy. So Ruma is our managing director for Southeast Asia here within Google Cloud. She's responsible for all of it. So when we talk about that, it's go-to-market strategy, it's our customers, it's our partner strategy, it's operational execution. But at the end, it's, how do we 10x growth with Google Cloud here in Southeast Asia? So not a small feat. Ruma is also very passionate about working with our customers and really focusing on their digital transformation and also thinking innovatively around kind of data-driven innovation specific with our customers. Prior to joining us, she spent many years at Cisco, was most recently the CTO for Asia, Japan, and the Greater China business. And then she also has had various roles within Cisco, was also at Hewlett-Packard for many years, and also had held various leadership roles. Ruma's also got the New York connection as well. She graduated from her bachelor's of computer engineering from Columbia, and then she went on to the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. So thank you, Ruma. And then Jane, I'm not going to steal Jane's thunder. Jane is the CEO of Pretzel Lab, so she's got some good stories to tell you. She majored in both chemistry and computer science, and she is passionate and loves solving complex, big, hairy problems, and loves to think 10x. So she went on to actually become and found Pretzel Lab, which is a leading innovative kind of consultancy firm working with executives and different teams on thinking differently around their business. And some of her fantastic accolades and customers that she's worked with, she's highlighted reimagining city planning. She's done a great job in working with large enterprise on how do you do smarter, better marketing and analytics. And lastly, taking leadership teams, boards, CEOs, et cetera, through design thinking processes as they work to accelerate their growth. So we've got Jane, Aireen, and Ruma. Thank you again for joining. So let's jump into kind of some questions. So we've got some Q&A that we've built in, and we also took some of the questions from you, our audience. So thank you. First question, I'll head it to Aireen. If you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey, and how you kind of got to where you are today.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Diana. Hello, everybody. How I got to where I am today. Well, I started my career actually in Wall Street. I was trading at Deutsche Bank Securities. And then I decided that I think I have enough of New York, and I didn't like how I've become as a trader, because I turned into this really angry monster unnecessarily. And I was just thinking about making money all the time. So I didn't like how I became. And I miss my family a lot in Malaysia. So I decided to come home, and there were so many opportunities in Malaysia that I thought that, okay, this is the best place for us to start and build something and contribute effectively to the economy. So I continued to be in banking, but in investment banking instead, in structured finance. And then I got tired of the whole investment banking, and I decided I want to try a little bit of, how to become an entrepreneur. So I actually ran into the two co-founders of AirAsia, and what they were building was quite disruptive in the travel industry, because, flying on planes usually are meant to be for the high end, the elites of the population. So they decided to disrupt the market and open it up for the masses. And I thought that was a very interesting idea. So I thought, okay, let's just do this. Let's see what I can do and how I can contribute and what I can become, apart from knowing finance and so forth. So it just grew from there, from corporate finance to treasury to fuel procurement. And then I had to lead AirAsia Malaysia as a CEO. Then suddenly we saw that we had built all these assets in data, especially. And how can we use that data to build something more than just an airline? And as a result, I had to lead the digital transformation exercise for AirAsia. And we built new businesses. And we pivot in a big way on how we turn from just flying people from one point to another point to becoming more of a lifestyle and travel tech company. And that's where we are today.
Fantastic. I'm a huge fan. Can't wait to get back on a plane. Thank you, Aireen. Ruma?
Yeah, thanks so much, Diana. And it is wonderful to be here. Thank you for inviting me to the panel. And it's great to hear the stories from Aireen and Jane as well. A little bit about my background. I'm an Indian American. I spent most of my life in my career in the US. I'm educated as a computer engineer. And my educational background is actually in artificial intelligence, natural language understanding. And what I discovered after a couple of years of being an engineer is that I'm much better at sales and consulting than I am at engineering. And so I very quickly pivoted to something that I really love, which is working with customers and working with partners and building teams. And over the course of my early career, I really sort of understood that, explaining technology in a way that's easy to understand for sort of, individuals within large organizations is actually a fairly special skill. And so I decided to sort of build on that skill. I went on actually to get my MBA and got very, very interested in the healthcare industry. So I spent a few years in the healthcare industry in management consulting, and then basically discovered that you actually can't make an impact on any industry, particularly one as complex as healthcare, unless you have a keen foundation around tech. And so at that point in time, I transitioned back into the tech industry. And after my second child was born, I was given the opportunity to actually lead my team. So lead a team of pursuit leaders and salespeople, and absolutely fell in love with that role because, it was just a great opportunity to really bring out the best in people. About 15 years ago, a leader that I used to work with really closely in management consulting, he was actually based here in Singapore, and he called me and said, look, I need a sales leader to run Asia. And back in 2007, I came over here. It was the typical thing, spend 2 years here and go back to the US. And here I am 15 years later. And Google is actually my fourth company. And what I've discovered about myself over the last few years, especially in Asia, is I love to transform and to be part of transformation journeys. And tech is sort of a great disruptor for that. But it actually is more than just the tech. It's really about how business leaders, think about their culture. In terms of how they bring their own employees on in that journey, employees from certainly, in the IT department and developers, but also within the business. And so that's been a really big learning for me. The second thing that I've really enjoyed doing is helping people transform themselves around, their own career ambitions and watching them sort of progress in their own careers. Sometimes it's not to more senior roles. Sometimes it's simply to lateral roles that just give them a new piece of their background that they can sort of fill in. So I'm delighted to be here, Diana, and just keen to share a little bit more about my journey as we go forward.
Fantastic. Thanks, Roma. And Jane, same question to you. If you could tell a little bit about yourself and your journey. I know it's a unique one, so would love to hear.
Thanks, Diana, and thanks everybody for having me. This is a real honor. So I think for me, I'll try and make it more funny than like factual, which is there are three things that everybody kind of gets to know about me, and then that's all you ever really need to know about me. So the first one is I am really damn lucky. I was born 3 weeks after my parents arrived in Australia after spending 6 months in a refugee camp in Malaysia. So pretty much from the time my parents left Vietnam to the time they arrived and I was born at 2 o'clock in the morning, my life could have panned out very differently, like at every kind of turn of that journey. And so for me, this, I think, it's part of who I am. And I think it's really important to know that I don't think you should bet the farm on like that one plan, right? Like that one plan is not the plan, because the plan literally goes out the window in the middle of a typhoon on a rickety boat, So I think every time you get a new piece of data, and every time I get a new piece of data, it's about checking the plan and then usually creating a new plan. So I think that everything happens for a reason. And I think for those who've read my bio or want to read it, like that's very true of the journey that I've taken. The second thing is I am innately lazy. That's what I tell everybody. And it's true, but what I really mean is that I don't like waste, right? I'm definitely a everything can be better, faster, easier kind of person. So I want to make things efficient and I want to make things effective so that I can choose where to spend my energy, right? Like I don't want things to kind of control my life that way. So whether that's shoveling dirt from the top of the mountain cliff in Nepal to figuring out the most appropriate, fastest way of helping my clients through the design squiggle, I just want to get rid of the waste. I want to just find the best way to get through there. So if you add that with my real, I guess, like innate, mission of I just want to help people and I just want to make things better, you probably have a pretty good idea about why the people I know really well find me really annoying. So I put all of these things together, and I think a little bit like Roma, I found my niche really in being somewhere between humans and technology. So I say to my clients and to my team all the time that if we put humans at the center of everything that we do, and we provide technical solutions for all of those things, then we can do quite a lot, right? And that's really what we are all about. So that's a little bit about me.
Fantastic. Jane, are you reading James Clear, The Atomic Habits? I don't know. Have you seen that book?
I have top-lined it, but I haven't read the whole book.
I just started it. It's on my nightstand. So just a plug for James Clear, Atomic Habits. It's actually a fantastic, quick, fast read. I actually just handed it off to my husband now to go read. So definitely one of those that's kind of just helps you accelerate getting better and getting better habits overall. So Ruma, question for you. What does resilient leadership mean to you? Could you give us an example of how you demonstrate resilience on your team?
Yeah, I mean, over the last probably going on 18 months, I have to say, especially in many parts of Asia, the pandemic has really thrown us for a loop. I think we can sort of all agree on that. And so, for many of us, it's, we've really had to redefine, who we are, how we interact with others, and how we lead in traditional environments where we've got teams, and also how we extend our leadership, maybe in times where we never even thought leadership would be a thing to be required. And if I could sort of crystallize it maybe in two words, which is really hard to do, for me, resilient leadership is really all about problem solving. It's problem solving for yourself first and foremost. It's making sure that you're okay every day, whatever that means to you. Making sure that your mental health is okay, making sure your family's okay, and just making sure your broader ecosystem personally is sort of in a space where you can be of value to your teams and to your broader business. It means problem solving for your customers, for your teams, and for your partners. And I'll probably just reflect a little bit on my experience with Google over the last 6 months or so. And I really feel that the company's done a great job with helping leaders really sort of exercise this resilient leadership. For example, 15 months ago when we were all sent to a work from home situation, one of the things that Google did was we actually enabled people to have the kit. So I'm speaking to you right now on a video screen that was actually provided by Google, which is really neat because many people in their apartments and in their homes really didn't have the kit to enable them to work effectively from home. The second thing that's happened is that there's been a recognition over a period of time that it's really important for people to spend time away from the screen. So we have things called reset days, where we actually just finished with a reset day here a couple of weeks ago, where we basically, just the entire company takes a day off. So, in situations where you're customer facing, that may not be entirely possible, but it's an opportunity, I think, for the company to say, like, it's okay to sort of, spend time away from work and, really do the things that you enjoy doing and that are important to you. The third thing that I would say is that, from a team perspective, the thing that I've found really helpful is this idea of the employee survey. And, some people are sort of eye rolling around employee surveys. We all sort of, love to hate them. Sometimes we love to love them, depending on, our personal situation. At Google, we actually take employee surveys really, really seriously. It's a survey that we call Google Geist, and it's done every year. And there were a few things that happened with our Google Geist survey this year, and I just want to share a couple of findings that we had. First of all, at a company level, all the way down to functions, across, broad spans of Google in every single product area, this idea of well-being ended up a thing that, as leaders, we all need to help our teams with. And, if we just sort of double click on that sort of a million times over, we find a few things. The first is that well-being means different things for different people. So when we think about resilient leadership, part of it is really understanding, at an individual level, what that whole well-being, aspect is. Because if you don't have well-being within your employee base, then, they can't be productive to go off and serve your customers and partners. The second thing that we found was that employees are having to be always on. So this idea that you've got to carve out time for people to sort of step away, whether it's to say, after between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., you're not going to receive any pings, you don't have to do email, etc. That sounds a little bit basic, but we actually found that, that sort of stepping away process was really important. because right now we don't have the commute home. So we don't have a time when, you know, we have time away from our screens. The third thing is that, you know, we are a growth company, and so we are adding a lot of people. And that process has meant that, you know, we've had individuals, we call them nooglers, you know, joining our company. And sometimes those nooglers, you know, have been on board for a year to a year and a half. They've never stepped inside of a Google office. And that's really, really challenging because Google is a very experiential company. So we've had to sort of get that experience, you know, in a virtual way. So things like, you know, virtual drinks, you know, at the end of the day, and those kinds of things have been really important. So, you know, those are some of the things that I think about in terms of resilient leadership. At the end of the day, I think it's all about agility, the agility to sort of solve problems as they come up, both in the short term as well as in the medium term.
No, Ruma, thank you. And then for those that are watching, kind of that ties in with Ruma was mentioning, there's a great article that Forbes actually just published called Taking the R Out of Remote. So if you get a chance, it has some great tidbits on just things to think about as you're working remote. So thank you, Ruma. It looks like we might have Aireen on technical difficulty. I'm just going to head over to you, Jane. One of the questions I have for you actually came from one of the folks who registered for the program today. So what are the most important traits that leaders need to adopt during such uncertain situations? And how are we preparing our future leaders to deal with similar situations? So Jane, thought that would be an ideal question for you.
Thanks. This is a really great question. I think, like, in summary, my response is be the person in the arena. And so for those who aren't familiar with Theodore Roosevelt's quote, "The man in the arena," I highly recommend it because, I mean, in summary, it talks about don't be the critic on the sidelines, be the person in the middle, trying all the things, whether you fail or whether you win, right? So for me, I think in principle, that's the underlying foundation of what leadership should look like. And I think that's it, you know, it speaks to me in the try, just keep trying, right? Like we try, we fall, we get up, we try again. What did we learn when we fell last time? So with that in mind, I think there's a few things that I think are really important for leaders. One is I think leaders need to inspire confidence. That's not the same as having all the answers, and it's not the same as knowing everything, right? I think it's about helping people feel confident that they will get to the answer or an answer at some point, right? And I think sometimes our visions of leaders are either highly militant, where they're just like, this is the direction and that's where we're going, and maybe that's the right thing, but it doesn't feel like they take into consideration the things that we don't know, right? Or what about? So I think inspiring confidence that we're doing those things. Technically, the next one is 3 things, but it's humanity, compassion, and kindness. I think over the last 18 months, it's easy to dehumanize people because we're further away from them. We have these screens where people turn their videos off. We can not call people by name, and it becomes very easy to create disconnection. And I think as a leader, you have to maintain your humanity. Because this is what it's all about. It's all about the people that you lead, right? And the people that you're trying to help. Like I said, we need to be in the arena. And another point, one of the engineering managers that I used to work with said this about himself. I am not the smartest engineer. I am the one who learns the fastest. And I think that's right? Like he totally understood where he sat in the pecking order of, you know, knowledge versus ability. And his ability was to learn, and that's why we put him in charge of everybody else, because he could learn faster. And I think for leaders, this kind of goes, you know, straight to inspiring confidence. Like, I don't think you have to feel like you need to know all the answers. I think you have to feel like you can go and learn them quickly, you know. And I think with that hand in hand, that last point is to be able to adapt accordingly, right? So don't bet the farm on that plan, just embrace change. I think change has been, is, and will always be the constant, right? Like, I think that the pandemic is really demonstrating that, like, in full, in full force. So I think that, I think we actually have to learn how to do that. And so to the second part of that question, how are we preparing? To be honest, I think at the moment we aren't preparing very well. Where a lot of leaders, including myself, are sort of preparing on stage, to be honest. This is like, oh, surprise, like, here's a pandemic, hope you know what to do. And obviously the answer is not always. So I think part of what we should be doing from here on is creating spaces where it's okay to practice this stuff in a safe place where you can create the scenarios and play them out and really understand, like, why scenario A with solution B isn't going to work. Like, what does that mean, without having it blow up in your face and, ruin your client's business or tank your business or whatever the disaster is going to be. I do this with my team often, and I think that it helps them reduce the amount of anxiety they have about going into a client meeting, because they don't play the what if scenario while the client's talking. We play the what if scenario before they go into the meeting. And so how do we create that on a larger scale? And I think we as current leaders should be creating those spaces now for our next round of leaders, and hopefully that will become part of the habits that move forward.
Fantastic insights. Thank you, Jane. Another question actually that we received from the audience, I would like to hear how our panelists' approach in decision making looks like, especially during the pandemic, when decisions need to be made under very much a time pressure and amid uncertainty. So it kind of stems with the prior question, but it's really more about that decision making process. So perhaps maybe a list of maybe 3 items, or kind of how you go through that decision making process. Maybe Jane, just hand it to you quickly.
Yeah, sure. I actually have 5, but they're short. Okay. So I have a really clear process, right? I'm pretty process oriented. So the first one is I have to give myself boundaries to work in. So what are the decisions I need to make? When do I need to make them? How long do I have to make them? What's the impact of my decision? The second thing is I have to ask myself, like, what do I already know about the situation? So this includes, have I made this decision before or something similar? Have I seen somebody else make this decision before? How did it go? Etc. The third thing is, how do I get what I don't know already? So I have the things that I do know and the things that I don't know. So who do I need to speak to? What data can I collect? What can Google tell me? Both the people and the platform. What are the things that I have control over? And what are the things that I don't have control over? This is really important, I think, because we can spend a lot of time ruminating over the things that we don't have control over. And if you're in a really kind of pressure cooker situation, it doesn't help. That's waste, right? Like, you can't do anything about the things that you don't have control over. Focus on the things that you do have control over. And then who else should I consult? Who should I bring in to help me make this decision? That's my process.
Fantastic. So Ruma, if you're thinking about your decision-making process and you're kind of under this time pressure now that we're in this new normal, how do you go about that?
Yeah, I think, and I really like Jane's framework here. I think of a couple of things. The first is that I have this sequential process where I think about, like, what is the impact on employees first and foremost, which is really interesting because my framework has changed a little bit. If you had asked me sort of 2 years ago or even 18 months ago, what's my number one concern? It would be, well, of course it's the customer. But I think that has sort of flipped for me to say, like, first and foremost, what if I'm going to make a decision? What is the impact on my team and on employees overall? I am fortunate enough to lead a team that operates across 6 of the 10 countries within Southeast Asia. And, we're in very, very, as you all know, very different states of employee well-being, the way we can operate with our customers and that sort of thing. And so first and foremost, I think about employees and the impact that my decision will have on them. The second thing is customers. So really sort of pivoting from employees to customers very, very quickly. And then the third thing is the broader ecosystem in terms of the partners that we work with, in terms of government, in terms of other parts of the universe and the countries in which we operate. And so that sounds like a little bit cumbersome, but actually those decisions, if you get good at them, can be made pretty quickly. Like, I've taken certain decisions around customer situations in particular, really quickly, like within sort of minutes. So I think those situations can be addressed pretty quickly. To Jane's point, it takes some practice. And I think, honestly, over the last 18 months, many of us, unfortunately, have had more than enough practice with this fast decision making.
I would agree. Aireen, welcome back. So the question for, this is actually a question we have from the audience, is they'd like to hear how our panelists approach decision-making processes. And what does that look like during a pandemic where decisions are made under a time pressure? So Aireen, so you at AirAsia, kind of how do you look through that? Either it's a framework, or what's kind of your process on making, time pressure and good decisions?
Yeah, pandemic has actually, it's something that we've never expected from a company that we have flown all around the world with, and one of the best low-cost carrier in the world as well. Suddenly, it's a decision to be made to survive, basically, because the borders are closed, we can't fly, we have less than 20% of the capacities where we're using right now to fly people or goods and so forth. So what do? We could just sit down and cry and dwell about it and just ask for help from everyone. But what we could do was, first thing, what do we have in our books, right? What are our assets here in terms of people, in terms of planes, in terms of the network, in terms of the data that we have? So we had to quickly sit down and regroup with all the key management, and we have to identify first, what do we need to address first? The cost part of it. What can we do to renegotiate? What can we do to reduce the cost even further, basically? And how can we support our people? Because the last resort would be to let them go. And we value them because they help us where we are today, basically. So a lot of the decisions in the first 2 weeks was based on cost. It's based on survival mode. And then from there, when we have a good idea on what we need to do and what we need to convey to our business partners, we saw the opportunity here. As an airline, we have built an interesting, amazing assets, right? We have huge network, huge database of over 560 million people in the region, basically, that actually visits us on a uniquely basis on per month, about 50 million in the website or in our app, and so forth. And the fact that we identified earlier that data was an asset, is an asset to us now, as opposed to the planes. And we actually embarked on this digital journey more than 3 years ago. It has actually helped us to pivot fast. And by having Google as our partner, it has helped us to do so in the most effective way. As 90% of our, we are at 90% cloud already, so that allows us to visualize the data better. That allows us to make quick decisions better, to make real-time decisions and so forth. So as a result of those, we decided, let's build the non-airline businesses that we have put as a roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years. Let's squeeze that in 9 months. Let's repurpose the assets, repurpose the database, repurpose the people who is currently not doing anything because we're not flying, and get them to help us build our AirAsia.com, which we turn it into a super app. It was meant to turn into from a platform that sell only our flights, but then we turn it into an online travel agent just before the pandemic, an OTA, where we also sell other airline flights, and we started selling hotels and all the travel-related businesses. And then from there, we saw the opportunity of how a consumer behave, and we could provide a lifestyle line of business as well, including where they are and what they can do, e-commerce businesses and so forth. So during that pandemic, we had to squeeze that roadmap to 9 months and build it.
We had to change the mindset of our people and just say, okay, we've got to do this. We cannot just sit around. We've got to build this business. And we're able to do so because all our data is centralized. And thanks to Google, we're able to do that in the fastest way possible. And we started building the businesses in our non-airline digital business. So we have now AirAsia.com. It's a super app platform that serves travel, e-commerce, media, and so forth. And then we have our logistic business called Teleport. It's a spin-off from our cargo department because we saw the opportunity on how to build this into an end-to-end solution for logistics, not just managing the belly space of the aircraft, but also how do we manage the belly space of other airlines' aircraft, as well as providing the first and the last mile door-to-door delivery as well to facilitate the e-commerce boom that you find in this region. And then the third one is how do we build this fintech business that which we have created and turn it into a digital ASEAN bank. And we have all the necessary licenses that we have in Malaysia and in Singapore, and we're hoping to be able to have those licenses in Thailand and Indonesia and so forth. So essentially, we've created a whole ecosystem of lifestyle and travel. And in that process of pursuing this and pivoting in a big way, we had to restructure our tech team in the big way. And the academy that we created was meant to help build our own talent pipeline, to help upskill the existing tech team that we have to make sure they're world-class in nature, just like Google. And secondly, as we do more and more machine learning work, right? Obviously, a lot of the people that we have would need to be redeployed. There will be hundreds of them that would need to be redeployed. So as a responsible employer, how do we help them build that necessary skill sets so they can be part of this digital journey and they can help in these digital businesses that we're building and so forth. So we created a co-curriculum together with the help of Google and our tech heads to create a co-curriculum to reskill them with, especially those with no tech background at all. They have to go through a fundamental course, and then once they graduate, they can then choose a course of their choice. Whether it's in data science or software engineering or product UI UX or cybersecurity, digital marketing or cloud infrastructure. So we did that just before the first lockdown in Malaysia last year. And we opened it up to all of our all-stars, which is our own staff. We call them all-stars. And they embrace it in a big way. We just decided that there's no requirements, no assessment. We just open up to you so that you familiarize yourself what technology is and what digital economy really means to you. So after that fundamental course, then they start choosing the track of their own. And we have 2 batches now who's doing this training. And it's amazing to see baggage handlers who are doing data analytics, pilots who are coding and learning to be software engineers. We have cabin crew who's doing digital marketing and social media influencer and so forth. People in operations control center who deals with day-to-day airline, flights and routes and so forth are doing digital marketing and all that. So it's amazing to see how we can repurpose the manpower, right? And how we can help them be part of this whole digital journey. And as a result of that, it gained a lot of interest coming from government agencies and other corporates. And, it took a life of its own. The academy that's meant for us to build our own talent pipelines has suddenly become the nation's center to help with reskilling the population and help reducing the employment rate and so forth. So it's exciting times. But the main thing is we have to be agile and be quick thinking. And, we got to make decisions fast, right? Whether it's the right or the wrong decision, you don't know in times of uncertainty. You just got to make that decision. If it's the wrong decision, you just got to move forward and just find other ways to build upon what you thought it would have been. And the most important thing is to take care of your people, right? Communication is key. Changing the mindset is not easy. And give them the opportunity in terms of what we could have done. And all that is because we identify what the assets that we have right now with the limited resources that we have and what we can do to make this an opportunity rather than just waiting for government handouts to help us to survive, basically, because that usually doesn't quite work in many ways.
What a tremendous turnaround story, Aireen. Thank you. And the thread through all three of you is focus on your people, focus on the humanitarian aspect of that, bring them forward with you, but make decisions fast. So we're coming up, we've got just a few more minutes for a couple more questions before we open it up for Q&A. I'd like to actually head over to Jane. How do you envision leadership in post-COVID?
Good question. I covered some of this in one of my earlier questions. So I think inspiring, whether that's changing your little part of your world to trying to change the whole world, I think leadership should be inspiring. And our leaders should be inspiring. And I think that we should be inspiring people to make things better. Otherwise, we stay stagnant and we don't move forward, right? I think it should be daring. I really take the man in the arena kind of to heart. I want to embody that, right? I don't think our leaders should be standing on the sidelines. I think our leaders should be showing the way on the ground, showing everybody that they're willing to try and fail or fall as much as everybody else is, and do it again. I think we need to keep it real, and I think we need to create connection. I want to believe that we are beyond the days where leaders have to pretend like everything is really easy and effortless and we have all the answers and we just, like, I don't know, we're somehow like accoladed, we're born this way. It's ridiculous, right? So I think like sharing our attempts at trying and sharing our falls as humans, it makes us human. It makes the journeys for other people possible, right? Like when you think that somebody else didn't go on a hard journey, then it makes it difficult to think that you might ever get to where they are. And I think it helps make us relatable. And I think we need to stay connected as leaders to the people that we're leading and the people that we're trying to inspire. I mentioned before that we should stay compassionate. I don't want to be judged in my worst moments, and I won't judge you in yours. We're humans, and I think we should know the difference between intent and impact. And I think we should treat each other with kindness because of it, right? Like this is how we are. And I think the last thing, which I think everybody knows this now. So one of the most interesting things I think COVID has done is humanized everybody, because now we have this literal window into everybody's actual life. Right, here we are looking all very professional, and then, you know, something, child, dog, maybe naked partner, who knows, right? Like anything could happen in the background. And then you've got like, oh no, the video is going off and somebody's screaming in the background. And now we're all just humans, right? Now we're all the same. Everybody has the same problems going on. And I think if we hang on to that humanity, then our leaders are going to be amazing, right? Because we're human. So that's what I hope that the post-COVID leadership world looks like. Great response. Thank you, Jane. I'm going to hit a couple of questions that we actually have. Let me scroll down in the chat window. Aireen, I'm going to actually hand this one over to you since you worked on Wall Street. I actually also lived in New York, so I understand the intensity that New York and the traders have on the floor. So the question is, how did you break the glass ceiling that many claim exists for women in technology or women in business in general? So maybe if you could just share kind of in this part of the world, how we can get more women in tech.
Yeah, I think it's very important when you do anything that you don't think of yourself as a woman first. You think yourself as an individual and how to be the best, the best version of yourself, right? So when I'm given the job or a project to do, I will always try to see how I can beat the expectation of what is expected out of me to do that job, basically, right? Let's surprise them. Let's see what we can do here that would be better than what they, that people were used to. So I think when you focus on your energy on that, rather than thinking about, okay, I'm a woman and I need to speak in a different way, I need to be a little bit more aggressive or whatsoever, just focus on addressing the problem, focus on building or develop the project that needs to be done. And then you'll be surprised at what you can really do. And I think the deliverables itself will speak louder than anything else. And I think I've been quite fortunate to be able to do so, and not realizing whether in the room there's so many women or men, or whether I fit in this meeting or so. So I think you've got to focus on that work at hand, and then everything else will just comes naturally or so.
Fantastic. Thank you, Aireen. The next question I'll pass over to Ruma. Any challenges you could share that you faced as a female leader, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, it's, you know, and I have to say that women leaders of today are much better at this than I ever was, and that's around authenticity. I think it's really hard to be authentic as a woman leader, especially of a certain generation. You know, and I'll tell you, it's a little bit of what Jane talked about earlier. You know, most people really want to understand your struggles and sort of the how rather than the what. And so sort of, you know, sharing that journey that you've been on and being really sort of open and candid about it was actually really, really challenging for me. And one of the things, it's really interesting, one of the things that I did when I first came to Google, and actually, Diana, you gave me this opportunity, is I was actually, you know, asked to speak in what we call a coffee chat at our Women at Google Employee Resource Group. We call them an ERG. And this was really daunting for me, actually, because some of the questions that were asked were really sort of, you know, I would say very direct around the journey that I'd been through. And it was actually scary for me to sort of, you know, answer those questions pretty forthrightly. But I sort of decided to put myself out there because at the end of the day, I think that authenticity actually buys me a bit of street cred, to be honest.
Absolutely.
You know, street cred with employees, with you know, with leadership. And I think for me personally, that's been one of the most challenging things, but it's been a bit of a life lesson, because once you sort of get over that hurdle, then you can leverage that into, you know, basically a skill that you can leverage, you know, that you can leverage just in your day-to-day conversations, and you end up having those, making those interactions much more meaningful.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ruma. Next question is, Jane, it's tough to find underrepresented candidates who want to take the risk of changing jobs, especially during the pandemic. Any suggestions on what resources or suggestions you have to make them feel confident in giving that ability to make a change?
Yeah, this is a good question. I learned this acronym recently, and it's called FEAR. And so what is fear? Fear is false evidence appearing real. And I think if we work through fear, we have to ask ourselves, or in this case, candidates, what is the evidence? Is it real or false? And if we don't know, how would we find out? So how would we actualize the thing that's presenting itself? Because I think often we're our own worst enemy. You know, I know that lots of contributing factors around stability and financial safety, and there's a lot of unknowns. But I think that, again, we project a lot of those to ourselves, and it comes back to that scenario, you know, based thinking that I was talking about. So if I'm worried about changing my role to a role that I think is more risky, how can I use fear and work through a framework that helps me really evaluate whether I'm making things up in my own mind or whether some of these things are real, and can I address them because now they're real? And remember, I said, like, don't waste your time on things you can't control, because that's just waste. Focus on the things you can control. So I think by doing that, I think you empower the candidates to really build the confidence in themselves, right? Because they've taken that journey to really, really self-actualize through the challenges that they're kind of placing in front of them. And of course, I'm not going to discount, like, some of those problems are absolutely real, right? And I think then it's up to us as the people who are seeking them to help solve those problems, right? Like, how do we help you? If it's a time issue, how do I help you with the time issue? If it's a money issue, how do I help you with the money issue, right? But now I have words for them. Now I have things for them that are very tangible. So I think so to me, like that's probably my best suggestion.
Fantastic advice. That was a question that we had from Roshini. So Roshini, thank you so much. The next question is from Gowrie. How do women who have to take career breaks get back in action as the market keeps us invisible when they see a career gap? Interesting question. It'd be interesting to hear, Aireen, AirAsia's kind of perspective on that, on kind of women coming back into the market, and Ruma, just from a Google perspective as well.
Hi, yes. I mean, we embrace them. We take anyone who's willing to work, who's passionate about working, and who's got great ideas that they want to share and contribute. And I think a good thing about this is that understand what's going on in the market right now. What are the consumer demand is? What are people doing? What are the areas in the digital economy where there's high growth or so? So maybe, before you get back onto the market, perhaps you need to be able to equip yourself with some of the knowledge and so forth. So at least you have a good start when you join. So that's my advice, actually.
Great. And Ruma?
Yeah, absolutely the same perspective from a Google standpoint. I just want to reiterate, Aireen's piece of advice, which is learn as much as you can. If you're able to do that. I know that, obviously many women in particular will take the time off for caregiving responsibilities for children, for parents, for other members of the family. But if you have the ability to learn as much as you can, just grasp that opportunity, take certification courses, learn a lot of things online. There's so many resources available. And I will tell you that, any company certainly focused on tech, Google included, will absolutely embrace the ideas of anyone who's either taken a career break or not taken a career break. So I think it's a great opportunity to just, learn as much as you can.
Yep. I personally have actually gone through this, not me personally taking the time off, but actually working with friends of mine who've taken the time off and then helping them back in the workforce. And one thing that's interesting is, they say, oh, we'd like to go work for a Google, or we'd like to work for AirAsia. They like to work for a name brand organization. But one thing that was really valuable is getting them in very quickly on the ecosystem around that. So Ruma talked about partners. Aireen, you've got AirAsia's got strategic partners. And those strategic partners might be smaller organizations, and they're more nimble, and they need help, and they need thought leadership, and they need people who have these skills. So it's been a tremendous way for actually 3 people personally that I know who actually have gotten in kind of through the ecosystem within Google Cloud. And then they've taken off, and 2 companies actually went public. So it actually was very good fortune for them. So thank you, Gowrie, for that question. Tarun's got a question. During lockdown, a lot of leaders are facing challenges when it comes to productivity. Interesting, since we actually have our Google Workspace. How do leaders at Google deal with this challenge? So maybe Ruma, just straight to you on the productivity of employees.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've actually seen productivity increase, and we have the opposite problem. We want employees to disconnect a little bit, because at the end of the day, we do feel like mental health and physical health is impacted the more they are online. One of the things that we do, and Diana, you're aware of this, is that we have Google Workspace, which is our set of productivity tools. I am only about 6 months into Google Workspace, and I feel like my life will never be the same again, because I can actually be much, much more productive just because of that platform. I will also say that productivity is very much defined by the job that you're in. So, for example, if you're in a customer-facing role, and I lead a go-to-market team, so a lot of my team members are in pure customer-facing roles. Quite often those kinds of roles tend to go in fits and starts. So, we'll have sort of busier times of the quarter, or we'll have customer situations that are quite intense and that die down over periods of time. So I think it's very, very role dependent as well. It all comes back to, the point of view that we shared earlier is that, productivity is very much on an individual basis, and you just need to understand, how individuals, based on their roles and the environment that they're operating in, i.e. their context, can really impact their productivity.
Yep, no, fantastic. And this will be the last question. We've got a question from Zina, being an MBA student. She's trying to build her skills and knowledge to be the leader for tomorrow. How would you recommend they think about a career development plan? Maybe Jane, may I hand that question to you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Diana. Great question, Zinnia. So I talk to a lot of people in this space, and I guess there are a few key things. The first thing is leadership comes in many forms. So a lot of people think about leadership as leading from the front, and that's definitely one way to lead. But there are lots of ways to lead, and being part of a team and leading from within the team is another really great way of leading. And being a leader from behind is also really important. Leading from the sidelines, also really important. So there's lots of different ways that you can lead. So that's kind of one thing. Just keep that in mind. Number two, like I said before, practice, practice, practice. Find ways to practice, whether that's joining, a group online to, I don't know, do an offshore project or something together. Great, do that. Or get together and organize a small community project with, a bunch of friends. These are really good examples of resourcefulness, leadership from various different places, and you want to try different things in each of these. And to me, as someone looking to bring in leaders of tomorrow, I'm looking for your willingness to try. I'm not looking for your perfection, right? So that's the last thing, because I'm not expecting you to know the answers or know how to be a leader, because if you did, you'd probably already have my job. So that would be great. But so we're not looking for perfection, right? So just know that this is about willingness to try and try again, and persist, right? You'll have to, I guess the biggest thing that I say to people around leadership is you need to know who you are at your core. And when you find who you are at your core, your leadership will come from there. Don't try and be somebody else's leader. Don't try and be a leader for somebody else. You have to lead from within. And once you've found that, you've gone through that journey, leadership, I have to say, kind of follows pretty easily. It's the self-acknowledgement is the harder part of that journey. So do all of those things. And I guess, like any job, talk about them authentically. Ruma mentioned that earlier, right? This is probably the hardest thing. The balance between showing off and showcasing is pretty fine, but it's also really easy to find when you do it properly. So they're probably my tips.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jane. So thank you again, Ruma, Aireen, and Jane. This was fantastic, and great participation for the Q&A that we've had from the audience. So thank you so much for engaging with us today. So we've reached the end of our Thinking with Leaders session. We would very much appreciate it again if #ThinkingWithLeaders, if you'd post this and circulate this around your social media, that would be appreciated. I'm also a leadership coach within Google. Just two other tidbits as well. There's a great book that's written by Jenny Blake called Pivot, as you're thinking about your career. And there's also something we've been using at Google. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Myers-Briggs. Think of this as a lightweight tool. It's called Clifton Strengths. And there's a free tool and there's a paid tool. But you can go through it, and actually it'll go through about a 20-minute questionnaire, and it'll help you actually pull some of the strengths. And I think that goes back to Zinnia, some of your question on how would you lead and what are those strengths that you bring to the table. So we're constantly looking for ways to improve. Please take the survey so we know how we can improve moving forward. And thank you again for joining us. We're always looking for top leaders. So Pretzel Lab, AirAsia, and Google Cloud. So please check out our career pages on our websites. And again, we very much appreciate Aireen in Kuala Lumpur. We've got Jane in Australia, and we have Ruma here in Singapore. So thank you all. It's been a great session. Enjoy a late lunch or a tea if you're in Australia. Take care. Thank you.